10 is the time. There is a word that I only discovered. Well, I knew the word before, but I didn't know its application in this context, and that word is mesh. How closely have you been paying attention to this programme over the last couple of years? Do you know in what context I discovered the correct usage of the word mesh? I find this image that I'm about to create in your mind absolutely fascinating. I'm talking about two cogs turning independently of each other, or one cog turning. Actually, let me start again. Are you still with me at the back? One cog is turning, and the cog very, very near it is not. Do you know why? Because the cogs have not meshed. It's not bite or joined or melded or anything like that. The correct technical word to use, and this could be your, if you haven't heard me demonstrate a slightly bizarre enthusiasm for this word, or indeed this fact. If you haven't heard me do that before, then this could be the thing you take away from today's programme that you didn't have before. I like to think we learn something from each other every day. So two cogs mesh. I am fascinated by that to, as I said, a slightly bizarre degree, because I see it in the news so often. The things that mesh and the things that don't. So you've got a cog that's spinning furiously, and it should have meshed. The entire country should have responded to that story. That's the spinning cog. The rest of society is the other cog. And once those two cogs mesh, then society wakes up to the importance of the story that set the first cog spinning. That's all right, isn't it? That works. That's pretty good, right? Here's one front page today. Plot to burn down Starmer's home linked to Russian mastermind. I'm going to say that again. That's the front page of one of our newspapers this morning. Plot to burn down Starmer's home linked to Russian mastermind. That is a spinning cog. My first band was called... No, forget it. You know, I've been banned from doing that joke by one of my children. My first band was called the Spinning Cogs. Dad, no more. Enough. That cog is, in my mind, spinning like a dervish. Plot to burn down Starmer's home linked to Russian mastermind. And there's more. Prime Minister also targeted by sex worker conspiracy straight from Putin's playbook. My mate Gary sent me a photograph the other day, because I've told some of my friends how fascinated I am by something I haven't been able to talk to you about on air, which is a conspiracy theory surrounding the arson attack upon Keir Starmer and the prosecution, which concluded successfully yesterday, of the men responsible. Growing up, that they were male prostitutes or rent boys that were seeking revenge on Keir Starmer for, I don't know, not paying them or something. Now, if this is the very first you've heard of this story, is it you? Is it the first you've heard of it? That's interesting, because I notice these things in my inbox. Keith's too busy pressing buttons and second-guessing my next mistake to pay much attention to what's in the inbox. And, of course, if I don't read it out, Keith doesn't see it. Keith doesn't know about it. I can tell from my inbox when something very weird is happening. And I noticed a few months ago that the same sort of people that were telling me that phone masts cause COVID, or that brown or black people are responsible for all the crime in this country, or that London is somehow not a nice place to visit, or that I think a little oddly about ULEZ quite a lot at the moment. I'll tell you why shortly, but precisely the same sort of people who thought that ULEZ was going to be the end of civilization as we know it, and then went absolutely, and this sadly includes an awful lot of people in my profession, they went absolutely silent within about 5 minutes of it being introduced, when it turned out that they were either barefaced liars or gullible mugs who'd fallen for all manner of disinformation. Oh, something else useful for you to take away from today's show. I am spoiling you today. I'll be getting the Ferrero Rocher out next. If you want to remember the difference between disinformation and misinformation, and a recent speech by the Mayor of London suggests I should have given him this note last time he was in the studio, it's really easy. D for deliberate. D for deliberate. So disinformation is deliberate lies designed to foment activity, designed to create an actual response. So disinformation, deliberate lies. Misinformation, accidental lies. If you want to remember the difference between disinformation and misinformation, my gift to you today is D for deliberate. D for deliberate. And then you'll remember D for deliberate, D for disinformation. The disinformation is deliberate. So I don't know whether the people that were wanging on about ULEZ were indulging in disinformation or misinformation, whether they were just gullible mugs or whether they were dangerous agitators trying to, because the mayor is a Muslim and the mayor is brown and he was introducing something to improve the air that we all breathe. Some people persuaded themselves that that was a bad thing to do. And that happened on the internet. That happened on social media. That happened more, I suspect, than anywhere else than Elon Musk's platform. My friend Gary was in Folkestone at the weekend, sent me a picture of some graffiti, or if you prefer, a graffito. Sent me a picture of a graffito in bright red paint that is that contains, emblazons the legend Keir S and then a heart. So Keir S, Keir is spelt wrong, which is a shame, really, but, you know, not the biggest element of this story. Keir S loves rent boys, with a big picture of a heart. And the reason Gary sent me that is not because we're both weird, but it's because last time I saw him, I was telling him, this is a really big story. This is a really big example of M for mistaken as well you can have. So D for deliberate, M for mistaken. There's your perfect solution to disinformation and misinformation. But I was telling Gary last time I saw him that this is a really, really powerful example of how, good Lord, I nearly used an entirely inappropriate word there, how banjaxed we are, how absolutely banjaxed we are. So a process that for me probably began with people claiming that phone masks caused COVID has gathered pace with every passing year, hasn't it, since that moment, to a point where an arson attack upon properties owned by our own Prime Minister has its roots in Moscow, a Russian mastermind using a Telegram account, a Russian-speaking Telegram account to promise payment in cryptocurrency. There it is again, cryptocurrency. Who's the politician who took 5 million quid secretly from a cryptocurrency billionaire and then didn't tell anybody about it? And shortly after accepting the money, announced policies that would be... I'll give you a clue. The policies have been removed from the website. I'll give you another clue. It's the same bloke that claims mainstream media somehow misrepresents his words by playing them out and reminding you... It's the same bloke that took 80 quid to promote the IRA, that bloke, who claims that his words are... Oh, Nigel Farage, that's the fella. Another cryptocurrency angle to this story and another Moscow angle to this story. Isn't it weird how often those 3 points of the triangle pop into your mind? I say crypto, you say Farage. I say Moscow, you say Nigel. As far as I know, he doesn't have anything to do with this story, but of course, who knows? Because he doesn't tell you when people have paid him money to get involved in certain things or not. 2 men found guilty of conspiring to carry out arson attacks on properties connected with our Prime Minister. Investigators now exploring suspected links to Moscow. Russian intelligence agents have previously commissioned attacks in Britain using similar methods. That is huge to me. That is a cog that is spinning at about 1 million miles an hour. That cog should be meshing. I turn to my other front pages and it is... Guardian doesn't have it, the Mail doesn't have it. I mean, look, it gets good coverage. The Telegraph, to be fair, which I've often told you, somehow manages to sustain a decent news operation while having an opinion desk that is absolutely crackers. They go in on it properly. Russian diplomat quotes linked to firebomb attack on PM's home. But it's the I newspaper that does the best job on this story, and I'm not just saying that because I've recently signed up to write a column for them every week. I'm saying it because they've got Lizzie Dearden as their security correspondent, and she's absolutely brilliant on all of this stuff, whether misinformation or disinformation. So I don't know if you knew about this. Keith didn't, and he sits a few yards away from me every day. But I have been obsessed for a while with the number of people messaging me to say, oh, I can't believe you're not going to talk about the rent boys, are you? And I couldn't even tell you why I couldn't talk about it, because it was a live well, A, because it was complete rollocks, and B, because it was a live case. It was a live criminal case. And it occurred to me that becomes a sort of self-fulfilling prophecy. So you read some utter bilge on the internet about your own Prime Minister being promoted by people who wish harm upon our country, by foreign state actors, wishing harm upon our country and being amplified by traitors to the British cause. Inevitably, Yaxley Lennon's fingerprints are all over this story. The idea that Keir Starmer had been targeted by unhappy rent boys over a failure to pay bills for their services in a normal country would have got less than a nanosecond of attention. And yet, I think it's pretty huge. I think it's pretty widespread, not just because of what I've seen in my inbox, not just because of what my friend Gary photographed under Folkestone Pier last weekend, not just because of what came out in court yesterday, but also because of what we know about our country, what we know about what people like Elon Musk and J.D. Vance are doing to our body politic, are infesting our national conversation with lies, whether it's threats to freedom of speech or whether it is claims that London is lawless. And that's why I think about ULEZ quite a lot. The claim that ULEZ was designed I can't even remember what they claimed when they sort of ran around the place chopping down cameras, and the lad from Lewis who wasn't Lewis was shooting his mouth off all the time about something or other and how it was a grave threat to this, that. I mean, it was utter rollocks. It was rollocks then, it's rollocks now. Do you know that we have calls for celebration this week? The number of emergency hospital admissions with breathing-related difficulties in this city that I call home has plummeted. In a normal country, we'd be celebrating that. But of course, all the people that were railing against ULEZ are the same people that brought you Brexit and brought you Boris Johnson and brought you Liz Truss and brought you austerity and told you Donald Trump was a genius and told you Benjamin Netanyahu could be trusted. All of those people were anti-ULEZ, so they're never going to turn around and say, oops, sorry. Dick Littlejohn's not going to be writing an article about how everybody owes Sadiq Khan an apology because ULEZ has been a glorious success. They're just going to pretend it never happened, just like they're pretending that the debacle in Iran never happened and writing about other things instead. It's almost like there's a pattern, isn't there? It's almost like there's a pattern. But I don't actually know what to do about it. And as ever, on the programme is where you come in. I want to know three things. So this is the story, right? A conspiracy theory that claimed that the arsonists convicted yesterday were male prostitutes seeking revenge on Keir Starmer. That is the story. That is the extraordinary context or subtext to the conviction yesterday of a Ukrainian construction worker who'd been tasked with setting 3 fires targeting Sir Keir Starmer's former homes and a car, also linked to him by a Russia-linked online account working to foment political division in the UK. Do you see what I mean about the cogs? We had a phone-in last week about what this threat is that we're all supposed to be animated by, the threat to our safety that prompted John Healey and then Al Khans to resign as defence ministers. What is this threat? Of course, it comes from Russia more than anywhere else. And of course, the first signs of it emerged during the Brexit referendum. So of course, the massive majority of our media can't go near it because they were either poo-pooing the reality of what was going on or pretending not to believe it. Or, if you're Andrew Neil, issuing misogynistic abuse towards Carol Cadwallader for being one of the first people to blow the whistle on what Russia was doing to us. Do you think it was an accident that your Auntie Doris's Facebook page started filling up with anti-EU propaganda in the 24 hours before she marched into the polling booths to vote to leave the European Union? Of course it flipping wasn't it. Some of it was paid for by Dominic Cummings, and God only knows where the rest of it came from because the companies responsible for it subsequently disappeared. So we are under threat from Russia. They are interfering with our democracy. Stephen Yaxley Lennon was in Moscow last week with his trotters up with Elon Musk's father, who is best known for having impregnated his own stepdaughter twice. Hashtag save our women, protect our girls. So why is that cog not meshing? How can that cog be spinning so fast and it's not meshing? The country is not waking up to what is going on. He's the son of a senior Russian operator, a senior Russian politician, the lad that they've got on the hook for this. They're literally boasting about things that his dad gives him access to. It's got everything, this. It could be a Mick Herron novel or a James Bond film. And they are paying people in this country to set fire to our own Prime Minister's property and then fomenting disinformation designed to make people believe that he has only been targeted because he doesn't pay his bills to male prostitutes. Hello? Anyway, here's Nigel Farage to tell you why we should all be nicer to Russia and Vladimir Putin is the politician in the world he admires most. Oh, and also, what's his favourite biscuit? It's incredible, right? And it goes hand in hand with all the other stuff. He also encouraged these people, these men who were living in London, alongside the orders to commit arson attacks. He also encouraged them to put up posters for a fake far-right group and to spray anti-Muslim graffiti around our country, around our capital. Meshing yet? Cog spinning, not meshing. This might be the most important thing going on in our world at the moment. This might be the most important thing going on in our country at the moment. Foreign state-sponsored activists not only trying to set fire to our Prime Minister's property. I mean, nothing says patriotism like being quiet about that while you're shinning up a lamppost to stick a nylon flag outside a house of somebody who doesn't want it there. This is happening under our noses, and it's happening on the platforms that the government has announced this week that it is going to address if you're under 16. But mum and dad who believe that Keir Starmer's house was set on fire because he doesn't pay his rent boys' bills, they can still spend their lives scrolling through Twitter and Facebook and the rest of it. But the kids can't. Listen, I loved the proposals announced yesterday, don't get me wrong. But the more I think about it, the more I can't help thinking that we should have extended it to anybody under 100. Social media should be accessible only to people over 100 years of age. Joke, but only just. A conspiracy theory that falsely claimed that the arsonists who targeted Sir Keir Starmer were male prostitutes seeking revenge on the Prime Minister was spread through Russian disinformation networks. Lizzie Dearden reports in the I paper today. Panorama have done it as well. The Financial Times have covered it as well. But what do those three outlets have in common? They're not read by idiots or watched by idiots. Come on, James. You've got to get a better word than idiot here. Who am I talking about? That's the first topic this morning. Who am I talking about? Who do you know that believes this stuff? And what are they like? 0345 6060 973. So we did it with COVID and the phone masts, and it was illuminating and heartbreaking in equal measure. You know people who believe that Keir Starmer's house was targeted because he didn't pay his rent boy bills. Who are they? How widespread is this conspiracy theory? 0345 6060 973. Who do you know that believes it? 0345 6060 973. And finally, how do you battle it? How do we help? And that caller yesterday, that lovely call yesterday from the lad who was from Ipswich working in Nottingham, talking about how he couldn't get off social media. He turns it off and he comes back because he wanted to help. He wanted to do something. He wanted to sort of fight this tidal wave of filth and disinformation and lies and racism that's swamping all of us at the moment. He couldn't. How do you do it? Someone who believes that Keir Starmer's former home was set on fire. I think his sister-in-law was inside at the time because he didn't pay his rent boy bills. What are they like? Kelvin in Ipswich, I'm thinking of. What is going on here? How widespread did this conspiracy theory reach you? And if so, how? Was it a person or a platform that brought it into your life? 0345 60. I'll stop saying the number, you know it by now. So how did this conspiracy theory get into your life? How widespread is it? Tell me about the person you know, or perhaps you are that person yourself. How the hell did you end up believing such obvious and utter bilge? And what can the rest of us do about it? Because I couldn't do anything until today. And some days when we're discussing stuff like this, I look away. I think, I can't be doing with that. But what do we do? How do you counter this level? How do you get the cogs to mesh? How do you get the cogs to mesh?
James O'Brien on LBC.
It's 25 minutes after 10, and it is frankly extraordinary that a story like this can reach to the very top of our society, to our elected Prime Minister. Property linked to him, targeted by arsonists in the potential pay of state-sponsored Russian actors. That's a story in and of itself. But the online, the way that British people joined in with the attendant disinformation, the claim that he had been targeted by these men because they were disaffected or unpaid rent boys, is, I mean, you can tell. I'm actually, you wouldn't know it because I just did a 22-minute monologue, but I am lost for words about what to say next. How can we be so chuffing stupid? How have we allowed our brains to be boiled to mush like this? And who am I talking about? Am I talking about you? Am I talking about your mum? Your mum said this to you? Oh, yes, you know why that is, don't you, Doc? Nice old mum. Nice old mum, great with the grandkids. Oh, you know why that is, don't you? They're rent boys and Keir Starmer didn't pay. That's the point. This isn't just the sort of ranting lunatics anymore. This is your mum. It's your Uncle Keith. It's your Auntie Doris. How do they end up believing it? Helen's in Bonus in Scotland. Helen, what would you like to say?
Hi, James.
Hello.
So this theory actually came to my attention a few weeks ago.
Yes.
So I want to be a bit careful because I do really like this guy, and he's really talented. He's a tattoo artist that I go to. He's like world class. Like, we're not talking.
Well, don't give away. Well, I mean, if you're just for your, I don't care.
Yeah.
You can name him if you want, but in terms of if you're worried about that, don't give me too much detail.
Sure. So basically, I've had a few day sessions with him. So you're talking 7-8 hours at a time.
Okay.
And from the first session, and this was a few years ago, we started a process of building a sort of sleeve, and he just started spilling off all these different conspiracy theories. I mean, about everything, like Paul McCartney being dead, you know, all the classic.
Yeah.
But my last session was a few weeks ago, and this one came up. And I was just, I find out, I always know every time I go in to see him now, I'm always like, okay, what's it going to be this time? You know, what's it going to be? And the reason I'm sort of calling is because I wouldn't put someone of his maybe profession and his world experience, because he travels around the world doing what he does. He comes across all sorts of different people, you know, very inclusive, I would say. And suddenly this is coming out, and it's not the sort of, you know, you sort of typically associate this with your Farage voting kind of right-leaning.
I don't anymore. Do you know, oddly, I'll tell you why, and it's a really weird one. Ian Duncan Smith with ULEZ, I think a lot of roads lead back to ULEZ, but when Ian Duncan Smith essentially said that he's happy for residents to attack ULEZ cameras, or he understood residents that attacked ULEZ cameras, I just found myself thinking, this is not confined to the darker corners of the internet. Comments were reported of him saying he was happy for his constituents to, quote, cement up the cameras or put plastic bags over them because they are facing an imposition that no one wants and they have been lied to about it. He later told the Evening Standard that he does not condone law breaking of any kind. But of course, as typical politicians speak, putting plastic bags may not be, but probably is actually a crime, but cementing them up certainly is. So, and this is the point I want to make this morning with your help and everybody else's. This is not confined to any constituency of people anymore. I think everyone is vulnerable and susceptible to it. Everyone.
It's true, and it's really hard because you sit there, and obviously you're in a vulnerable position because someone's got a needle in your arm, and you know you don't want to upset them.
How did he introduce the subject? What did he say?
I think when we first, as in this particular theory or conspiracy theories in general?
This one, the Rent Boys.
Right, because I would say we set it up years ago when it was like, oh, I love a good conspiracy theory because I'm interested in them because I find them interesting.
But he believes
it. Believe it. But then, so since then, he's kind of built up this idea that we're both in this world and we both, you know.
So what did he say? How did he say? What does he do? Does he go, oh gosh, have you heard that kids?
Yes. He did,
and he just doesn't question. He never questions anything. How do you get through life not questioning anything like that?
I don't. He
could almost be a radio host.
He very much comes across more like we're the idiots for thinking it's not true.
Yeah.
You know, we're all going to find this out soon. You know, it's all going to come out soon. You know, and it's all, it's very much like he's the one in the know.
Okay, I mean, I get that. It applies to all of it. And it is very much, I think, the first taste I got of it, probably, and I told you this at the time, a lad I was at school with in the 1980s, early 80s even, got in touch, first time in 40 years, because he'd seen a video explaining that COVID was caused by phone masks. And he said, you're the only person I know in the media. And this looks real. Is it true? And I wrote straight back to him, and I gave him chapter and verse and all the links that he needed. I just said, no, of course it's not. But it's the same thing, right? And I can't call them idiots. This is the point. That's why I told myself off a minute ago. It's the point Helen makes. They're not idiots. It's your Auntie Doris. It's your... I'll come up with some other names. It's your Uncle John. It's your Uncle Bob. It's your Auntie Mary. It is. I promise. So what do you do to help? How the hell do you help? And what if you're having a relationship with this person that goes further than them being your tattoo artist, which can be quite an intimate relationship as I understand it, particularly if you're having a full sleeve done. But what if it's your boyfriend? What if your wife says, you remember, I haven't spoken about her in ages. I was obsessed with her for about 6 months last year when I did jewellery service in Isleworth, and I'm sitting at the table having a bit of a chat with some of my fellow non-jurors. I never got on a jury. I was there for nearly 2 weeks. Absolutely outrageous behaviour. And at the table next to me, a woman who just arrived, a second week of jury service, was telling everybody... What was she telling everybody, Keith? She was telling everybody that Michelle Obama was a man, which, of course, was shouted by an idiot from... And I think we can call him an idiot, but by a UFC fighter on the White House lawn at the weekend. And that Volodymyr Zelensky was spending all the money that he was being sent on yachts, and he owns the 3 biggest yachts in the world. And she was, a twin set and pearl type of person. She was, a well-turned-out, well-spoken, all of those things that I think need to be highlighted to stress how widespread this nonsense is. And, of course, that must have had some roots in Russia as well, right? Why would you be going after Volodymyr Zelensky? John Stratford's got your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
35 is the time. So, Russian-sponsored conspiracy to set fire to property owned by the democratically elected British Prime Minister is on the front page of one newspaper today. Where are all the patriots? Where are all the hashtags? Where are all the people who care deeply about this country? And obviously some of them are halfway up a lamppost with their knickers around their neck. But where are the rest of them? Where are the rest of them? Where are the people who care about this country, care about its safety, care about its security? Here is evidence of not only attacks directed personally at our elected Prime Minister, but also of attempts to completely malign and misrepresent him as a victim of crime. This incredibly widespread conspiracy theory that the arsonists who targeted Sir Keir Starmer were male prostitutes seeking revenge on a former customer. And you know someone who believes that. You might not know that you know someone who believes it, but if you've got more than 200 friends on Facebook, you probably know someone who believes it. It's so widespread. Tell me about the person you know who believes it, but also, what do we do? How do we start to... Because Kim Leadbeater, Joe Cox's sister, and indeed her widower, Brendan Cox, talking about how the country is a lot more divided at the moment than it was even when Joe Cox was assassinated by a white supremacist murderer on the morning that Nigel Farage unveiled his Breaking Point poster. No real mystery as to why, but you don't undo division and hideousness like this until you agree on the truth. You have to agree on the truth. You can disagree about everything else, but you have to agree on the facts. You have to agree on the truth. And this is so utterly outrageously false and so widely disseminated and believed that, of course, it speaks directly to the kind of division that we're talking about. 10:37 is the time. Matt's in Bradford. Matt, what do you want to say?
Oh, thanks so much for having me on. Sorry, I'm a bit nervous. I'm a nervous wreck.
It's only me. It's only me.
I know. You always say that, and yes, still terrifying. Yeah, it's funny, when you hit a chord this morning, and I had to ring off. I just thought, I've got a few friends from actually different groups who don't tend to socialise directly with each other, all of which have, when on occasion we've discussed it, gone into this rent boy thing. This has been going about for, must be well over a year now. It really must have. And on the occasions I've bothered to challenge it, because we do have differing stances on things, especially with me listening to you every day as well.
Yeah, can't be healthy.
You've been huge in... I know, it isn't. No, not for my friendships anyway. It's... in the way that I've been really astonished. And as I just said to your colleague then, I think it enters into there's a homophobic streak to it. There's no doubt about it. Like, definitely, I think the the way I wouldn't like to say how some of my mates talk about it, but they're very quick to adopt all sorts of sort of homophobic slurs, etc., in regards to discussing this topic. I think that's a big part, but also pushing them towards a sort of right-wing field and agenda. I think that's another. I think that's a big part of it. I think that sits in the background. I mean, the way I challenged it was thinking, well, I'm not on social media myself. I've never been on it.
Well, I knew about this one because it breached the cordon sanitaire. I get the message. I don't get many. I get the message saying, why aren't you talking about this? Of the same people. I've got 2 messages today saying, it's just like you believing Operation Midland when the police described the allegations of Carl Beach as being credible and true.
Yes.
And apparently it's exactly the same to think that the police are telling the truth about allegations of child sex abuse as it is to think that some avatar on social media is telling the truth about Keir Starmer being attacked by disaffected Wren boys. And if I click on the history of the kind of people that send in messages like that, it's all there. It's all there. They're Farage fans. They're racists. They're homophobes. It's all there.
They don't see it. I mean, one thing I always notice about it is they'll come out with homophobic stuff. They'll come out with racist stuff. But they will always straight away caveat it with, I'm not a racist or I'm not a homophobe or whatever.
What do they think they are? What do they think they are?
They object to the tagline. That's what I find so funny, is they find the tagline offensive, yet are constantly sort of engaging in something that would have anyone attribute that tagline to them. I just think it's so difficult to comprehend. I mean, my mates, the way I put it, I said, look, do you really think the amount of people whose raison d'etre as media outlets in some cases, I won't name them,
sure.
Is to see the Labour Party, out of government as swiftly as possible, wouldn't be all over this like
if there had a scintilla of truth in it, a single scintilla of truth.
Exactly what I said. You're so foolish to think they wouldn't be indulging themselves less.
Look what they did with his field. He bought a field for his disabled mother to look after donkeys, and he accepted some free spectacles from a Labour Party peer.
There's just always a distortion. There's always just something. I mean, to be honest, it brings tears to your eyes because, these lads I refer to are my dear mates.
Well, a lot of people are asking why they're still your dear mates, but I understand why.
I get that. They are, because I've known them for 20, 30 years, and they're my boys. And, I can always set aside stuff like that because I see a person in other regards. All right, it's a nasty sort of... element of your personality to possess, but I can look past it when you're a decent, honest, you're not a thief, you do genuinely care.
And this has been done to them. I think this is a really important point, isn't it? This has been done to them.
But they're adamant they've made their minds up themselves. There is exactly it. I mean, I've tried so hard to sort of just try and dispel the theories, but, James, I tell you what, it's amazing how little they listen to your show, but how quickly they are to start throwing your name in my direction.
I have an extraordinary presence on social media, which...
You do, and I say it's amazing how you can... honestly, when they talk about you with visceral hatred, and I'm like... But do you listen to him?
Of course they don't listen to him.
I've seen the clips. Well, you're obviously being fed a certain... you don't know what sort of clips they're being fed. It could be AI generated for all you're aware what's going on online.
Yes, this is also true. But part of the reason for that is that there are hardly any of us. That's the mad thing about what is going on online, is that you look at the people who... I suppose they would describe as being on the right side of these sort of stories, and the list is as long as your arm. And of course, it includes the people who are dedicated to misleading the British public or radicalising the British public or making everybody more racist.
But they can't see. That's what I said. They just cannot see the destabilisation that they're contributing to. It beggars belief. I keep just thinking, what is going on with these? Some of these people in prominent, political life, etc.
They're riding a tiger that they won't be able to control. No hostages puts it well. It's almost as though illiberals and oligarchs use moral panics and false accusations to stigmatise their opponents, while creating the impression that liberals, minorities, academics, and trade unionists are part of a shadowy force secretly controlling society. And this is really good. Whether it's Ulez, the Great Replacement, 5G, the Great Reset, Eurabia, cultural Marxism, gender ideology, woke, or two-tier policing, the pattern is remarkably consistent. They promote distrust and paranoia. They entice people with a promise of secret knowledge, and then they watch as disorder unfolds. And you raised it, so just to address the reason why I'm such a hero to these people, it's because there's only me and Carol Vorderman left.
Yeah. I think you are completely right, and people just, I hear it. I hear so many people that I still think are decent,
so what do you do?
journalists.
What do you do? Sorry, I'm interrupting you. Do you what do you do? Do you give up? Do you just talk about the football instead?
I really do, because it's not just that the discussion never goes in a sort of. It becomes so heated. It becomes so. I don't know, just worrying. I mean, they are so sort of set in stone as far as their position on this matter. There's no telling.
And this won't change today. I mean, what will they do?
The lunatic.
What will they do today? Will they just move on from it to something else, like they have with ULEZ?
So when the result came out and we now know where we are with it, and we can discuss it more openly, I was so tempted to send them a little screenshot of it saying no mention of rent boys in this particular report, and I just thought, what am I getting from it? Because they almost get a kick from the fact that I'm more pissed off with them. Oh, sorry, do excuse my language. Sorry.
I think we've done that. Just say annoyed.
Sorry,
That's
sorry,
okay. Don't worry.
Yeah. More annoyed. They're more. They find it almost funny that I'm sort of more
it's upsetting all the right people.
Exactly,
it's upsetting. I always remember that caller. I haven't mentioned him for years, when Donald Trump was in London last time lying. And he rang in to say, I love it. I know he's lying, but I love the fact that it upsets people like you and Sadiq Khan. And Sadiq Khan is a large part of this sort of conspiracy network, of course, because ULEZ was one of the first real breakouts from the online world into the real world. And the evidence is there. So social media posts, YouTube videos, and then on the 22nd of May... a Russian news site sanctioned by the European Union last year for being, quotes, under the permanent control of the Russian leadership, amplified the conspiracy theory, amplified the claim. And of course, inevitably, the first example they found of it was an X account that describes itself as a British patriot, claiming that it was an angry, unpaid rent boy that had set fire to Keir Starmer's property. And there it goes. Prominent far-right activists, some of whose names you will know, some of whose names you won't know, amplifying all of it. It's insane, right? And the reason why we have to talk about this is because Matt is not alone. In fact, Paul's already been in touch to say this lad is exactly the same as me. I've got good mates who just can't see what's going on. It's mad. I don't know what other word to use. But they are normal people. They're just ordinary men. They're just normal men. They are. I know that the homophobic stuff isn't something you feel, but you get pushed into these positions. You get manipulated into these positions. That is literally what disinformation is designed to do. It is deliberately designed to push you into bogus positions that then become dangerous because of the things that you will do, because you believe, I don't know, that Henry Novak's killer was an immigrant, or that the Southport murderer was a refugee. And even, of course, if they had been, it wouldn't justify attacking completely innocent people instead. What we saw on the streets of Belfast, what we've seen on the streets of Southport, what we've seen everywhere, fomented by all the same people who spread, well, not quite all the same people, some of them still managed to walk a tightrope of bogus respectability. So what do you do to it? What do you do? How do you deal with this? 0345 6060973. And can we find the most unbigoted person who believes it? So, like your mum who's not homophobic, you might be gay, your uncle, your dad, your boyfriend, your girlfriend, who don't buy into all the other stuff. They're not racist, but they fell for the rent boy story. They fell for the male prostitute story. And just have a little look at why. Because I'll say it again, I don't think there's anything more important in the news today than this story. Not just because of what it tells us regarding what's gone on, but what it tells us about what's still going on. It's 10:48.
James O'Brien on LBC.
51, and actually Lennon was shilling these Kremlin lies yesterday on social media. I don't know whether... He's back in the country, isn't he? He's finished his holiday with Elon Musk's father, who is best known for impregnating his own stepdaughter twice. #SaveOurChildren, #ProtectOurWomen. And he's back on social media, calling the arsonists who attacked our Prime Minister's property, quotes, models, end quotes. fomenting the idea. And I mean, he's got some fans in my inbox, I can see, a couple, but it's so dispiriting to click on them and see that they believe all the other stuff as well. How hard is it to let go? Maybe we need to talk to more people who've managed to let go. I mean, how liberating would it be? How often do you think of the bloke we spoke to 10 years ago? Just under 10 years ago, because it was in the immediate aftermath of Brexit, and his wife had told him to put his laptop away. That was it. His wife did not like what he had become, and he did not like what his wife was saying to him. He did not like what he saw when he looked at himself through his wife's eyes. And he said, I just put it under the sofa, James. You know, you ever do that, don't you? You lose your laptop because it just slides under the sofa so neatly. And if it slides a little bit further back, you can't reach it anymore and you have to lift the whole thing. But anyway, I digress. He just put his laptop away. And I said, what happened? Have we still got that call? Make a list of the calls over the last 20 years that just reach parts that other callers never reached. It's impossible to predict. No algorithm could do it. Sometimes they touch you, sometimes they don't. Two people could tell the same story using the same words, but in slightly different ways. One of the million reasons why I love my job. And he just put his laptop away. Didn't go on it for a week. I said, what happened? And he goes, I'm fine now. I'm happy again. Thinking of that yesterday when we spoke to Kelvin, who's coming at it from a very different angle. He is an opponent of all the stuff that other caller was accessing online, all of the invitations to hate, all of the lies, all of the bigotries, all of the Yaxley-Lennon propaganda, all of the Kremlin-sponsored disinformation, all of the Farage-friendly fetishization of flags and Simla and the demonization of all foreigners now. They've given up pretending that it was just European Union people coming here under freedom of movement. They've certainly given up pretending that they were Quranic scholars who were profoundly concerned about Islamic doctrines and didn't have any problem at all with the people. It was just given up on pretending that it had nothing to do with skin colour or nothing to do with where you were born. They're full-on racist now. And it's happened quite slowly, so they can announce, as Reform have done, using honest Bob Jenrick, to announce it, because Farage is still hiding from all but the most cosy and cuddly of questioning. Jenrick's announcing that firms are going to be taxed more if they hire people that weren't born here. Presumably that means they can't give Nadeem Zahawi a seat in Parliament because he wasn't born here. Oh, and Farage's girlfriend won't be able to work for the party in the way that she worked for him when he was in Brussels because she wasn't born here either, nor was his last wife. It's just insane, these laws, these ideas, these policies. But of course, there's nothing sane about racism. But I think sane people fall for some of these stories. And this male prostitute story is an absolute peach of an example, one of the best examples. 10:54 is the time. Why do people want to believe it? Here's a message. I don't trust anything that Two-Tier says. I mean, there is someone who has removed their brain from their head and handed it to these people on social media who are demonstrably sponsored by Russian actors. Why? Why would you want to be on the side of your country's enemies? Because that means you are actually a traitor, even as you wrap yourself in the flag and claim that other people are. You are actually a traitor if you're doing the Kremlin's bidding in a moment like this. Regarding a story, you're a proper, fully paid up traitor. How do people end up there? Darren's in Hammersmith. Darren, what would you like to say?
Morning, James.
Hello, mate.
I'm going to be careful because I've called up enough times for people to know who I am at this point. But I have somebody in my life that's close enough for this to be a deeply upsetting topic.
Go on.
First thing to highlight: this person had this issue a few years ago around the Black Lives Matter thing, and came off of all social media, like in terms of like the Facebooks, the Instagram-y things, as a solution to realising that he was getting a bit out of control.
As in, he was becoming an opponent of Black Lives Matter.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's another thing that should have been on the list.
Whilst having a mixed race and blended family, it was, it was a thing. Anyway, this person then decides to move, just only consumes YouTube videos now because and now I would say the situation is even worse because the thing with posts, you get sort of posts that come across you. These YouTube videos become like 10, 15 minutes sometimes of just biased bile, right? And on fact-checked biased bile. And I have this thing with this person in my life whereby I almost on a daily basis, it's now becoming a massive problem, because I'm like, well, that's not fact. I sort of say that's not factually correct. Like, where's your source for that? Like, show me what prove what you've just said. And to me, that's a very simple answer to anything that you might have at work or in a social situation. But these people are sort of like living and dying by this thing. And
that's just pause for a minute there, because that is the bit that I don't understand, or rather that's the bit I don't really get exposed to. I can click on a message from someone who is still clinging to the idea that this is true, and I can see vote reform, and I can see I love Nigel, and I can see third world savages, and I can see someone whose entire diet is online propaganda. But what I can't see is the reason for the passion. The reason for I mean, how can you so it's like religion, isn't it? You passionately believe. You'd give your life for something that is unprovable, and of course, in this case, untrue.
I think the key thing to know is that I think it's very difficult for people to admit that they might be wrong.
Yes.
And I tell you, I'll give you this example. I hope you can understand the link behind it. I know somebody who unfortunately tried to starve themselves, commit suicide by starving themselves to death. When I then asked the question about, like, why would they do that? Because it's quite a public thing to do. Someone explained to me that this person was so religious and of a Christian faith, was so devoutly religious. They had a mental health issue, and they had followed the book, every part of it, over and over again for the last 40 years. Right. And the book, and through the book and through the community of the church, they were told that if they did all these things, then they were going to be healed from this thing that they have. And when they've done the book back to back, and Jesus was coming back, and all these things that they believe so passionately, because that is their whole life, these things haven't happened. And the idea that you can devote your whole life,
can't take it away from them, can you?
Think so true becomes a reality that it's not true. The devastation that you would feel is just so acute that this person couldn't carry on. Now, I'm not saying that all people that believe conspiracy theories are like that, but it's just this entrenchment and this refusal to believe that it could be the opposite. And unfortunately, there are more people saying the things. There are more people that parrot these things than people like you. And I've long believed, so before you come back, but I've very long believed that the issue, most issues that we find ourselves in the UK at the moment, or we find ourselves in the Western world at the moment, is pundits. We have this onslaught of people, influencers and pundits, people that are not fact-checked, they're not regulated by anybody. They come online and they make their business by giving an opinion on topic A, topic B. And it's just so dangerous. And there are so many of them that suddenly this is now their job. But they're not like you. They're not people.
No, but by definition,
you get in trouble with it.
But by definition, they have to say things that you wouldn't be able to say on a regulated platform. By definition, they have to go further than Dick Littlejohn goes with his attacks on trans people, or they have to go further than Rod Liddell goes with his attacks on everybody, really. They have to go further than the people who are regulated and have got what I would once have called proper jobs. So they end up going down roads like this. So your person that we're talking about has bought in fully to the Rent Boy story.
I feel like sometimes I get a win whereby I break down what's been said, and I say, well, give me the, I got told the other day about the number of child groomers, blah blah blah.
Yeah.
And I said the key word in there is the per capita bit. Explaining what per capita means, and then explaining as to how you can skew a statistic or a figure on the wider picture. And then you think I've got a win there, and then and you think, oh, okay, this is getting a bit better. And they go, oh, they listen to what you say, and you show them, and you say, listen, I'm not going to tell you because I'm just going to repeat what I'm going to show you, and then you can think I've got a win, and then they turn around and say something else, and that's when you go down this road of
so it's like the Hydra. You cut one head, cut one head off, and two grow back. It's why I was right at the top of the show to bring 5G masts causing COVID into it, and all
exactly the same.
All the rest of it. And I'm getting a lot of messages about somebody who used to be quite a well-known politician who is, don't say any names because I haven't double-checked it, who is spreading this stuff as well as, crikey. So when he or she first said to you, "Oh, you know that these people in court for setting fire to Keir Starmer's old house, you know that they're rent boys he didn't pay," what do you say in return? Just like if you can cast your mind back, what happened?
I said, "Pardon, what?"
Yeah,
and then
sorry,
it was
what pardon?
And then it was repeated again. I said, "Where's that come from?"
Yeah.
Same thing I say all the time. And the thing is,
Oh, stop! You're jumping around again. You keep doing it. So what did they say? You say, where did that come from?
I said, "What they say? Where did it come from?" They said, and then they gave me the channel that came from YouTube, and I said, "Oh, okay, let's have a look at that channel because let's have a look at that channel and let's have a look at maybe
what else they've said."
What I said, and then let's have a look at what it might be sourced. And then I said, it's a bit like what your last caller said. I said, do you not think that if this was this much of a thing, then this would be
no,
recorded?
Of course it wouldn't, because the mainstream media don't tell us. It's two-tier. The mainstream media don't tell us about what's going on. They keep it secret. That's that crucial bit of the equation, isn't it? The idea that you're party to privileged information, that only people who follow absolute... Well, I can't say that word on the radio, can I? Only people who follow absolute merchant bankers on social... Oh, yeah, you've got to be basically like a spy. You've got to follow merchant bankers on social media. Then you'll discover the real truth. And it somehow gives people a kick. It gives people a hit. And we're back to that idea where ULEZ, I think I should say, the Great Replacement Theory, 5G causing COVID, the Great Reset, cultural Marxism, wokeness, two-tier policing, gender ideology, Eurabia, it's a new one on me. All of these people think that they are party to secret knowledge. And it is all being fed to them by the same characters, the same institutions. Some are doing it for money, some are doing it for much more malign and sinister reasons, and some are doing it for a little bit of both. 3 minutes after 11 is the time.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 7 minutes after 11, and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. We need to stay on that, don't we? We need to keep an eye on the next one that comes along, and if it doesn't involve criminal proceedings, we need to talk about it quite early on, because this is part of the reason why the regulation of social media announced yesterday with regard to under 16s needs to be extended. I think that the safest thing you can say is that any platform that has an algorithm is a publisher. I mean, as you expect, I've been giving it quite a lot of thought since yesterday, because the big takeaway from our conversation was that it's an evolution. It's the beginning of a process, not the end of a process, yesterday's announcement. If it has an algorithm, that means it is putting things into your site that you would not otherwise have seen, then it's a publisher, and it needs to be held to the same account as publishers. So if YouTube is printing videos or publishing videos of people spreading these lies about Keir Starmer's former home being attacked because he didn't pay male prostitutes, then that should be subject. I mean, for a start, there's libel involved there, but for a start, the platform upon which it is published should be held to account. And if the platform is held to account, then the unemployed idiots grifting these lies around the place will just be shut out of discourse, as they have to be, because you're not allowed to go around the place telling people to drink bleach or telling people to jump off buildings. There are laws against that sort of thing. So you shouldn't be allowed to go around the place telling milder but equally egregious lies. It's straightforward, and some of the solutions are not as complicated as some of the critics yesterday would have you believe. But they're not looking at the adults yet. Speaking of adults, we come next to one of those stories that seem to come around with unerring regularity. So many elements to the tragedy of this little boy, Preston Davies' death, seem to be familiar. I can't bear the photograph, you know. It's like that. What's the word you would use? It's whenever a child dies after a period of abuse and neglect, that you can almost see the decline, and the picture that will be used is the picture before it began. So you have a fresh-faced, beautiful little boy photographed, featured on the front page of one or two newspapers today, and then you have the extraordinary litany of And now it depends what word you choose to use. What word do you use? Because you could say tragedy or you could say failure. And I think one of the most important things to remember at times like this is that sometimes the knee-jerk reaction will be the right one. Sometimes it will be the case that professionals could, not should, there's clearly a should to it, could have done their jobs better. I think we saw it with regards to Henry Novak's killing. I mean, there is a strong argument for why the police officers behaved in the way that they did, but I would be incredibly surprised if the investigation doesn't conclude by stating that there was no justification and no rationale for handcuffing the poor boy. It wouldn't have changed anything. That's something else you may not know if you're relying upon social media grifters for your information. It wouldn't have changed anything. The pathologist made that quite clear, but it would have changed the nature of his last moments on this earth. So the public servants there, the professionals, could, not just should, but could have done something better. The difference between could and should in this context is hindsight. Yeah, I could have done something better. It means you could have known at the time that you should have done something better. I should have done something better is something you can only say with the benefit of hindsight, because if you were there again in exactly the same circumstances, you'd do the same thing again. And you never quite know. You know that the Daily Mail will be unable to resist questions like this on its front page. Did political correctness play a role in failure to stop them? I think we can all agree that when a baby is killed at the age of 13 months, the best way to honour his memory is by trying to turn it into a conversation about political correctness. Quite extraordinary. It's like Farage's anti-white racism, isn't it? Oh, and it's because the men who had adopted him and who... one of whom then killed him, it's because they're gay. That's why political correct. Such a great get-out-of-jail-free card for people who haven't done their job properly. Why don't you take accusations of sex abuse seriously from 14-year-old girls in... Oh, I was worried about being called racist. Oh, OK, that's fine. We'll turn you into a hero rather than a disgrace. Why didn't you properly... I was worried about being called homophobic. Oh, that's fine then. Shame the baby died, but oh gosh, yeah, political correctness is the real villain in the room here. It's insane what's happening. But I'm saying that a little bit too often at the moment. The 8 missed chances to save baby Preston from evil adoptive fathers. And the story is unbearable. The story is unbearable. And the 8 chances are these. I will explain them to you briefly, and then you will tell me whether or not this is a story about institutional failure or whether this is a story about fatalistic tragedy. And you may need to be in the services that I'm about to describe to answer that question correctly. The first was a 999 call, which, I mean, what you've got here is a killer and a coward. One of the men was the killer and the other one was a coward. So Jamie Varley is the killer and John McGowan Fazakerley is the man who could and should have done much more to protect this little boy from his own partner. Sexually abused and murdered by the teacher that adopted him. So, example number one of, and that's all. I don't want to turn this into a witch hunt. We don't have names yet. I'm always reminded of when Ed Balls jumped to the tabloid tune and called for the head of the woman that had been in charge of social services when baby P died, when baby P was murdered, and subsequently she won a significant sum of money in compensation because it was a knee-jerk reaction to a tabloid panic and it wasn't rooted in either facts or fairness. That doesn't matter to the tabloids, they'll do it anyway. Today, is it political correctness that killed this baby? No, it's the scumbag that adopted him and abused him and murdered him. That's who killed this baby. It's not political... I waste my breath on these ghouls. What a life. Taken from his birth mother at 5 days old because she was a convicted murderer. And placed quite quickly with this family, which is usually the dream in the case of adoptions. Getting a baby with a new family, with the adoptive family quite early, can minimise all sorts of problems further down the line, but not on this occasion. So, chance number one is a 999 call. The operator picked it up. There's no response. You can hear Varley in the background telling his partner McCowan Fazakali to put it down, put the phone down. They said that they had dialed by accident and really wanted to talk to the NHS line 111. When 111 rang back, the call went unanswered. So something had happened on May the 11th, 2023. 2 weeks later, they rush an unresponsive baby to Blackpool Victoria Hospital and tell staff that he suffered a nosebleed and had a suspected seizure. A nurse spots 2 bruises on his forehead, and the pair explain that Preston bumped his head learning to crawl. Okay, so far, do you think that sounds like reasonable accusation, that nurse should have known that he hadn't bumped his head learning to crawl? I genuinely don't know. I want to know today what you think about these chances. A month after that, the couple take him back to A&E with a rash. A nurse points out a head bruise, so Varley shows her a video of the boy pulling a toy box onto himself by way of explanation. So he said, oh yeah, I can show you how that happened, and he's got a video of the baby pulling a toy box. So that's 2 months, 2 bruises. Social worker, who they name, finds the boy looking a little pale and not himself. She puts the mood down to the fact that he's recently been unwell. That's chance number 4. He looks a little pale and he's not been himself. What alarm bell was she supposed to press? What alarm bell was she supposed to press? 2 days later, they're back in hospital, now for the 3rd time because he's not moving his left arm properly. It turns out he has a fractured elbow. Varley explains that he twisted it accidentally, laying him down in his cot. So you've got 2 bruises and a fractured elbow. Beginning to think that a flag should have gone up in the hospital, perhaps. Another social worker visits for Oldham Council. This is a child looked after review. And she says they write letters for the baby to read in later life. She wrote, "You had a few hospital admissions of late, and this made me ponder as to whether there was a problem. I decided there wasn't." So he bumped his head while crawling, and he pulled a toy box down on top of himself. I've got video footage to prove it. And he fractured his elbow being laid down clumsily in a cot. Then 2 more, which I think are really stretching it. He tells a colleague at his school, because he's a teacher, that he's having dark thoughts about drowning or suffocating the baby, but lies to his colleague and says that the social worker knows about his mental state, so the colleague doesn't take it any further. How is that a missed chance? Is that I don't know. Is that a missed chance? And then finally, the school's head teacher visits Varley at home because he's told colleagues he is feeling suicidal. And she leaves with no concerns. So, I don't quite know why I am reading this in terms that make it sound as if the authorities failed the little boy. Certainly the head teacher had nothing, could not really have behaved any differently. The colleague to whom he confessed his dark thoughts, but also revealed that he'd spoken to social workers about those dark thoughts, could they have done anything differently? At no point here does anybody seem to have had reasonable suspicion, except briefly the independent social worker who decided that there wasn't a problem. The second visit, we did phone-ins years ago, you know, that involved people complaining about being treated like abusers when they took their children to hospital with bruises. I mean, it feels like a different age now, but I'm not dreaming it. We definitely did that. So this story is unbearably horrible. How do we know if the authorities failed in stories like this? What should we be looking for? How do we know? The ease. I'd also like to know what it's like to be a social worker at the moment, because the ease, and it's a natural thing. Listen, I think it's disgusting for the Daily Mail to try to bring political correctness into it, but I think it is absolutely natural to feel pure cold rage at stories like this, although I don't imagine that particular politician will be fomenting or inciting any riots about this. You never know, because the culprit is gay, so there is room for at least one double standard there, but generally speaking, it's natural to want vengeance, and it's natural to want a target for these almost inarticulable emotions that we feel when we consider a story like this. I feel curdled inside, partly, I think, because the baby was adopted just as I was, and it just adds a dimension of personal involvement to the story that's almost unbearable. I think that the fractured arm, maybe but I'm not a medical professional. You are. You tell me. 0345 6060 973. If we form our conversation, if we build our conversation from the bottom up, it has to be about ensuring that something like this doesn't happen again, and we can't do that. We can't make it foolproof. No system will ever be infallible. People are sly and manipulative, and they lie, and evil people tell evil lies that persuade decent people that there's nothing going on. But I've read you the 8 chances that the Daily Mail and others identify as examples of culpability, and I don't, for the record, I think there's only one there that I think probably does merit someone hitting an alarm, someone raising a flag, and it would be the fractured elbow caused by twisting it accidentally while laying him down in his cot. But I'm not a doctor or a nurse, so you can tell me how feasible you think that is. 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. There is a great speed, there's a great rush to conclude that the professionals have failed and that they could have avoided that failure. And it's a really ugly impulse that is fed by organs like the Daily Mail, because the massive, massive majority of people who do this for a living do it, at least at the beginning of their careers, out of a profound sense of decency and wanting to do good. But, you know, you'd say the same about teachers, and this bloke's a monster, and he was a teacher. So there are obviously cases where people doing jobs that we should and usually do associate with decency, who don't deserve it. But how do you tell? So what do you think as a midwife, as a social worker, as someone who works with potentially vulnerable children? You've probably read this story as closely as I have. You've probably followed it as horrified as I have. What do you think? Only one person killed this baby, but could that death have been prevented by people who find themselves in the firing line this morning? The social workers are both named, which I don't know how helpful that is, and I'm not sure that used to be the case. It might have been a legislative response to a previous tabloid panic, I don't know. But, I mean, no one is going to be beating themselves up more than these 2 women who now face being beaten up by the court of public opinion and by normal media. God knows what social media is doing. That takes us back to the conversation in the last hour. So how do you know, as someone in these various areas, or even as someone who has encountered these various professionals and agencies and institutions, how do we tell the difference between failure and unavoidable tragedy? It's important, and I'm not for a minute suggesting that this one was unavoidable tragedy. I am asking you what you think, knowing now as much about the story as anybody else does. 0345 6060 973 is the number you call. My amateurish reading of the situation would be the fractured elbow is the point at which I want to know more. The fractured elbow is the point at which I think, in conjunction with the bruises, which I wouldn't have raised a flag for, in their entirety, that might have been the moment that a button should have been pushed, a metaphorical button. But the 999 call, the first 2 hospital visits, the social worker visit, the independent social worker visit, the confession to the colleague and the head teacher's welfare visit, I don't think that they are anything like what some outlets are describing them as today. But as ever, I could be wrong. Your thoughts, please. It's 11:25.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It's 26 minutes after 11, and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. And a couple of people suggesting class may well have played a part in this. Articulate, so seemingly middle-class professionals I mean, it's a tragedy. You know how obsessed I am with class in this country, and the idea that if you are of a certain class, you're less likely to behave in certain ways than if you're not of that class. It's utter rubbish. Such an English lie. Utter rubbish. The way that you've got public school educated men swanning around the place at the moment claiming that working class people are all racist. It's part of the same sort of problem. You think Cable Street was an upper class or a middle class rejection of racism and bigotry? This idea that they can't be dodgy because they're posh. Just nonsense. Forelock tugging, cap doffing. That might be part of it. But that wouldn't qualify as political correctness, would it? Sue's in Manchester. Sue, what made you pick up the phone?
Well, I work in the NHS,
Yes.
and I said to your colleague before I heard you say it,
Yeah.
the fractured elbow, I think, was the point with the red flag for me. But the difficulty is this child is already under the umbrella of social care. So it's not like you're making a new referral.
Of course,
So that's an issue. In terms of, I would be the last person to criticise social care. I think they've got a thankless task.
Yeah, I do too.
They're damned if they do and they're damned if they don't.
And you only ever hear about them when
absolutely.
tragedies occur. You never hear about the successes. You never read on front pages about children rescued from hideous circumstances.
Absolutely.
Offered another chance at life.
And those poor people that have been named, nobody's ever going to know anything about the wonderful work that they did. They're only ever going to associate it with this terrible outcome.
Yeah.
Parents of abused children are expert manipulators, and the fault ultimately does lie with them. There are some situations, obviously. I mean, when I did my training, it was all around the time of the Climbier report and everything.
Yes.
There are some situations that are just beggar absolute belief. But on the whole, you're also looking at people with workloads that are absolutely unmanageable in the best sense of the way you could. It's just, I know in my life and what I do, if I had another 2 days a week, it'd be around about enough to get it all done properly. Everybody tries very hard. So I think that's an issue. But there's also, I don't know, like I say, the ins and outs of exactly what went on here, but it also depends on the structure of the organisation that you're working in and the confidence of that professional to challenge things. Maybe somebody did raise red flags then and said, "Oh no, it's under social care." Who knows?
Well, that's what I was about to ask you, and that is something that you think is very feasible. That the doctor who accepted the story about the elbow fracture would have thought, well, the only people I can raise it with are people who are already involved in this child's case.
Yeah,
I hadn't
possibly.
even thought of that.
Possibly. And where else do you go?
Can you answer that question? Where else do you go?
You can't go anywhere else.
Social services
Ultimately.
are already involved. We're not happy with the father's explanation for this, but that's something that can you phone the police?
You could do. You could do, but you'd be putting yourself out on a limb there, and you could potentially be causing an enormous amount of problems for your own career, because then what you've got to remember is those parents that are doing harm would seize on that as an absolute, weapon to beat you with. So that makes it very challenging. Personally, in my career, twice I've done things, I've gone against the grain.
Yeah.
Once I rang the NSPCC anonymously.
Right.
Because I wasn't getting the answer that I wanted from my superiors.
Okay.
And I was very junior at the time. I wasn't even qualified.
Okay.
So I did that.
What happened?
With the
It was a baby a child you were worried about?
It was a whole family, yeah.
Right.
It was a whole family, and it was, obviously there was a pregnant woman involved, and...
you didn't think that she was safe, or you didn't think that the unborn baby was...
None of them were safe.
Oh,
none of them were safe.
From violence or sex abuse, or sorry, I don't.
God knows. God knows. I mean, certainly violence. There was emotional abuse.
So just epic dysfunction.
Absolutely. And I think they were probably well known to services.
Right. Okay.
Now, I don't know what happened. I wasn't qualified at the time, so you're very much not privy to anything like, Yeah. All I know is I went to my qualified colleagues and said, "This is what I've heard. This is what I've seen." and there was no further discussion about it. It was very much like, yeah, everybody knows about that. There's nothing we can do. So, I mean, now we're going back 20-odd years, so this is a long time ago. But I was so sickened by what I saw. I was heavily pregnant myself as well at the time.
Right.
That the next time I was on duty, I got that person's details and made that anonymous call.
Okay.
And then another time, and this is, again, not qualified.
Yeah.
I was typing letters for a child that had not been brought to an appointment, an ENT appointment, following a fractured nose.
Right.
A 3-year-old.
Yeah.
Very unusual injury, that, for a 3-year-old.
Yes, it is.
And again, at the time, I wasn't a mandatory reporter at the time. But then when I looked, I'd seen that this child had been sent, did not attend letters at discharge and discharged back to the GP on 5 occasions over 18 months. What parent doesn't bring the child to a follow-up following a fracture?
Mm.
So I raised it with my senior colleague at the time, and again, this is not a qualified capacity. So this was like in an administrative role, which we're all still supposed to be trained in child protection. And she said it's the consultant's decision. So I thought, I really don't think well, the consultant may not have actually looked at this history. They may have just thought, oh, they've not brought them to this one appointment.
Right.
And they might not have had time to see what I've seen, which is the 5 missed appointments. They're not on the same systems. They don't look at the same things necessarily. You're in the middle of a busy clinic. I can see how things like that get missed. So I challenged it again. I went directly to the notes. I saw everything that had been written down, including the fact that the community paediatric nurses had visited this child at home and failed to gain access twice and then discharged this child.
Right. So you feel there that there were red flags and there were things that... So I mean, that's fairly clear in ways that this case isn't really in quite the same way. And of course, presenting frequently at hospital is the opposite of not... I mean, you know, it somehow creates a false image of concern, doesn't it?
Absolutely, yeah, of course it does. But everybody in that chain of events has a part to play. And unfortunately, the vast majority of people in that chain of events are managing such enormous workloads that things are going to get missed. Now, whether anything was missed to the point where it deserves to be named and shamed, and, you know, at the end of the day... That just
happened regardless, doesn't it, of whether there's any grounds for culpability, because you've got one social worker... Go on.
Unless there's a prosecution for some kind of misconduct or manslaughter, corporate manslaughter, then why on earth are we putting these people in a position where they are going to, for the rest of their lives, be looking over the shoulder? Because there's insane people that could do awful things to them just because they feel like it.
Yeah, and I suppose we're back to the fractured elbow, and we may never know the full details of that, but I suspect everybody listening, you and me included, both think that if there's anything here that constitutes grounds for further action and punishment for not taking further action, it would be that. The other 7 things, I just don't see it. I just don't see it. And that there are elements to the story that render it all even worse. Taken into care because his mother had been jailed at the age of 14 for the torture in 1988, torture and murder of a pensioner. And her mother, the mother of the murderer, has been speaking to the media about how unhappy she is that no social workers had been disciplined or sacked in connection with the case. I mean, you can't even begin to imagine what a rational and reasoned response to that collection of facts would be. Anyway, here's John Stratford with your headlines. Thank you, Sue.
James O'Brien on LBC.
11:39. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where we are looking at the 8 missed chances to save the life of yet another baby who's died at the hands of people who should have been caring for him. Preston Davey was 13 months old, and what a miserable 13 months the poor boy led. Taken away from his biological mother because she was a murderer. She was jailed. at the age of 14 for the 1998 torture and murder of a pensioner, and put with an outwardly perfect adoptive family, unless you've got a problem with gay men, of course. But inwardly or privately, anything but. I mean, the polar opposite, in fact. The sexual abuse and the physical abuse, and subsequently the death. 30 visible bruises and serious internal injuries when he died. I don't know if you've seen the footage, and I'd probably discourage you from watching it because it'll make your skin crawl, of the murderer engaging in a sort of public display of, I don't know, what would you call it? Sort of keening and wailing at the hospital as the little baby was carried inside and writhing around the place. And I am not, as you know, I think by now, I'm not a particularly, what's the word that I want? I'm quite a peaceable person, and I genuinely and generally believe that people end up in hideous situations sometimes as a consequence of things that have happened to them and places that they have been pushed. I am not, however, made of stone, and there are some people who commit some crimes that remind me why radio presenters and contributors to radio phone-in shows don't make the laws and don't pass the judgments on cases, because I can think of no punishment vile enough for this character. And yet the reaction should not be different according to the innocence of the victim, or according to, you see what I mean? You're going to feel, I mean, it's a bit like being a racist and getting much, much crosser about a black person attacking a white person than you do about a white person attacking a white person. It is not a rational position to adopt, but we're all guilty of something similar sometimes. The murder of an innocent baby will hit us harder than the murder of somebody else, and that's why we don't make the rules. That's why you don't want the bigots making the laws. But how do we know whether it's a could have done better or should have done better? How on earth do we know whether or not these 8 missed chances are grounds for culpability? I'm suggesting not, with that one caveat of doctors diagnosing a fractured elbow and being told by Varley that he twisted it accidentally, laying him down in his cot. But as Sue just told us, there's every chance that the only agency to which you could have referred concerns at that point would be agencies that were already in play, that were already in place. 11:42 is the time. Alex is in Hove. Alex, what would you like to say?
Well, very similar really to what you've just said, James. I mean, there are always opportunities to intervene in cases like this. It's whether people take them.
Yes.
It's not just the broken elbow. It's also the teacher going to a colleague and to the head teacher, and they should know under protection, child protection things, they can make a phone call to social services who are already involved and say, I've got concerns. And there's always things. I represented 2 social workers in a very similar situation, almost identical actually, an adopted child who was murdered by a couple. And we knew before the verdict came out, we knew the verdict was going to be guilty. It's plain. But we knew before the verdict came out, that it would be the social workers blamed. One was a senior social worker with 30 years child protection experience, all the good that he did. He ended up having a breakdown. His employer wanted both of them sacked. The media wanted them sacked. As
a sort of public sacrifice, as it were.
Yes, and yet there was the people involved as the adoption panel. Where were they? They approved the adoption placement. There was a health visitor. There were numerous people who were involved in the case who didn't pick up, maybe should have picked up, because there is always opportunities to do that. But they were all overworked, massively overworked. Their caseload was unbelievable. And so, this is how things happen like this. Rare, but they do happen, and they will happen again. But we need to learn each time, make the professionals and take the time to link up and make their concerns plain. I think that's partly what's happened in this case.
Well, what could they have done? I mean, these two examples, the ones that you touch on, Varley telling a colleague that he's having dark thoughts about hurting Preston, about drowning or suffocating, but also telling the same colleague that social workers know about his mental state. He's already spoken to them about it.
But if you're approached with that, and my background prior to the trade union stuff was also in some child protection, when you get something like that information, you don't just keep it to yourself because you're told by the person to keep it to yourself. That's outside of the norm. If someone comes to you, James, and says, I've got these dark thoughts, what do?
I don't know. I've been thinking about that all for the whole of this hour, actually. I don't know what I'd do.
But any responsible
But if I knew
person,
you, so I'm getting a couple of messages from people who say that they knew Varley, and that's... if I knew you, then I would take a judgment on whether or not I thought that these were just mad thoughts popping up in your head, or whether I was actually... Well, that's the point I think we're both missing. I don't know you. You seem like a lovely bloke, but I don't know you. If I'd worked with you for 10 years and you said something to me, those 10 years would be a large part of my response.
Yes, but it's the content of what you're being told, and it's a live situation. It's not some kind of theoretical thing, or I'm a bit depressed or something like that.
No, but he's also told me that he's spoken to social services about this, and why wouldn't I believe him?
Because one should never, and a professional should never believe what they're being told. It's a head teacher and a colleague teacher that he's telling these things to. The head teacher, and I'm not trying to...
But the head teacher was only concerned about his own suicidal feelings. There was nothing... The head teacher hadn't been made aware of anything to do with the child being at risk. So she reassured herself that he wasn't suicidal and left. So I think she's off the hook, isn't she?
But I'm not saying anyone should be on the hook.
No, forgive my choice of words.
Child protection guidelines are very clear.
Yeah.
Where you get a concern, you pass it on to the people who can act on that concern. You don't take things on face value. She took it on face value. And 10 years, 20 years, it doesn't matter. This is a situation where there's a child involved. You have to act.
Yes, but that act may involve bringing the child to the attention of agencies that were already involved. I mean, so then you hit a cul-de-sac, don't you? Then you hit a bit of a dead end.
Well, but the chances then that things go wrong are heightened if she doesn't act, which is...
No, I get it. And of course, there are profound concerns about the mandatory reporting legislation that the government has announced. And I've read one article today suggesting that when it is introduced, it wouldn't make any difference to a case like this. I suppose we want to live in an ideal world for about one day every 2 years, where a multiple of the money currently dedicated to these agencies is dedicated to these agencies, where these people are better paid, have higher morale, have lower workloads. So every couple of years a story comes along. Alex has been involved with one, I'm describing another to you, and everyone can pretend that it's really simple and that Preston would still be alive if only these people had reported their concerns. But what you're describing is systemic failure built upon almost every public service this is true of. People who are doing more hours than they get paid for every single day, every single week, who are dealing with more than anybody can be reasonably expected to, who are being compelled and forced to do suboptimal work because the alternative is not to do it at all. And yet none of that constitutes excuse. So we've got the difference between could and should, and we've also got the difference between excuse and explanation. And maybe the teacher should have believed him when he said he was having dark thoughts about drowning and suffocating the baby, but shouldn't have believed him when he said he'd already spoken to his social worker about his mental state. I don't know, but I'm fairly confident that most of these people will be torturing themselves with thoughts of what they could have done differently, even before the Daily Mail turns up to start publishing their names and lobbing abuse at them. Don't take people's words for things. Seems like a bleak conclusion to arrive at. Don't trust anyone. Don't trust anyone. It's weird. I mean, again, it takes some of my thoughts back to the Henry Novak case, where I literally heard people suggest that if you ring in to report a crime, the first thing the police should do when they turn up at that crime is believe you to be the culprit. So if someone's burgling your house and you phone the police, according to some of the coverage of the Henry Novak case, the first thing the police should do when they turn up is make sure you're not the burglar. I mean, it is ridiculous, but of course, in the crucible of tabloid self-righteous fury, it's commonplace. The time is 11:49.
James O'Brien on LBC.
53. It's a little throwback to a conversation we had in the last hour. One of our contributors has contacted one of his friends that has fallen for the Starmer nonsense and shared the response with us, which I shall share with you shortly. But we are dealing with, a hideous story at the moment, and the idea that whenever a baby dies at the hands of parents who were under the auspices of social services, then the social workers get a kicking. Listen, there are radio presenters who are rubbish and unprofessional and uncaring and who promote also that you don't last very long in a job like this if you're rubbish, because you are judged by very easily accessible and achievable results. But, of course, you can be an absolute wrong-un and get good results. You can be lazy. You can be incurious. You can facilitate all sorts of hideous things from fascism downwards and get half-decent audiences, so you keep your job. So there's not a profession under the sun. I don't imagine you could be a rubbish Formula One driver. I think professional sport is probably an exception to this observation. But most jobs can accommodate awfulness. And social work will be no different, no more than teaching will be. Crud, you know what happened at my school, which was run by monks. You might have thought growing up that you can trust monk. All right, it sounds very naive now. But it's the speed with which the social workers are judged and condemned in the court of public opinion when there is no real voice for the defence in the court of the public opinion. You've just got a long queue of voices for the prosecution. And a lot of these people don't care particularly about the babies who've died or about the circumstances in which it happened. They just see an opportunity to give a kicking to, quotes, authority, end quotes. And yet they are authoritarians. They never give a kicking to the likes of Donald Trump or Boris Johnson, but a social worker who may or may not have messed up at work, yeah, they are absolutely ripe for a kicking. And it's a weird mindset. But as I say, there are people in this line of work who might do that kind of thing. And you and I will never be able to work out why. What I want to know is the difference between could and should. And what we haven't done yet is pin down the fractured elbow. You take a baby to hospital with a fractured elbow and the dad tells you, or the carer tells you, that he twisted it accidentally laying him down in his cot. I think that's the point at which something different should have happened. But, of course, it doesn't involve social workers, so it doesn't lend itself to tabloid fury in quite the same way that it would do. John's in Brighton. John, what would you like to say?
I was just calling because while the First Lady you had on and yourself were talking about where to go and only being able to refer to social care.
Yes.
But every borough, because of obviously some of the horrific cases that have happened in the past, one of the big things that every borough has done is they've introduced teams called MASH teams, like potato mash.
Yeah.
It stands for a multi-agency safeguarding hub. And the team that team has someone in there who has access to all the police records. Another person in that team has access to all the social care records. Another one has education, and another one has social care and stuff like that. So all the teams are part of one. So all the things that happened to this child, if everyone had reported it, when it went to that team would have been able to build a bigger picture of it, and then it might have actually escalated to where it should have gone. But unfortunately, not a lot of people know about MASH teams.
Is that right? Because I haven't seen it used in any of the coverage. I haven't seen any references to it in any of the coverage that I've followed or read. And yet, presumably, I mean, it has been instituted precisely so that these sort of things can happen. Police, health, education, social care. I mean, you'd only really have got... I don't think there's been any police involvement at any point. There was the 999 call, but I don't know how many 999 calls end up going nowhere over the course of the year. I suspect it's quite a lot. And then you've got the bruises in hospital, 2 occasions of bruises, both with plausible explanations offered. And then the social worker concerned that he looks a little pale, but no one's ever rung an alarm bell because someone looks a little pale, have they? And then you've got the fractured arm. So in the event of MASH having been alerted to it, they'd have looked at the fractured elbow, they'd have gone back to but that would be on the medical records anyway, wouldn't it, John?
Yes. So even the 999 calls, although they may not have been actioned, would have still been on the same record.
Yes.
Because the 999 calls, regardless of if it's actioned, it's still something that has been reported and been dealt with.
So you might somewhere have had somebody put these dots together and do what, though? Go round, pay a visit as an independent social worker and reassure yourself that the boy's fine.
Depends, because it's very much a case of if that independent social worker went round and had the other parts of that information about the unusual bruising and about the 999 calls and stuff like that.
Well, she did. She wrote, "You've had a few hospital admissions of late, and this made me ponder as to whether there was a problem. I decided there wasn't." That's the child looked after with you.
I would say that's where the ball kind of dropped and it shouldn't have been, unfortunately, because when you've got that bigger picture, that's where, because in my profession, we have to report to MASH even if we have a gut feeling that something's not quite right. And we can say to MASH, unfortunately, this is just a gut feeling I have, but I'd rather report it than not report it.
What happens if you don't?
So if you don't report it and then...
But how would they prove that you had a gut feeling that you didn't report?
Oh, no, so they couldn't prove it. That's not a provable thing. There is something about... Obviously, that would be your own morals that then you're fighting
but
with.
Also your own conscience as well. I mean, you'd be sort of talk yourself out of it, wouldn't you? It's only a gut feeling. Goodness, what happens if I report it? It's anything that's human is imperfect, right? And these are human checks and human balances, and they are imperfect because we are imperfect.
And the MASH team themselves, like there are times when I've called and said, like, this child has got unusual bruising or they've got, I've got a gut feeling something's just not quite right. They've said to me, it doesn't meet the threshold for us to action it, but we will keep it on file for if another report comes through.
Yeah, and I mean, that's not a million miles away from what happened, albeit within the individual agencies rather than in the umbrella agency, about which we should all clearly know more. And that includes, I think it's called an IRD in Scotland, and it involves interagency referral discussion all the time, but I don't know if the numbers in Scotland are any better than the numbers in England. Thank you, John. A lot of people knowing a lot more about these issues than I do, which is often the case on the programme. The time now is 12 noon. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. I wonder what we'll do next.
James O'Brien on LBC.
Minutes after 12 is the time, and tying in a little with what you just heard Brendan Cox saying in the news there. I've heard back from Matthew, one of the callers earlier, who was sharing with us the experience of having friends who believe all of the nonsense that is now largely unchallenged on social media, especially since Elon Musk bought Twitter. And here it is. I'll read you both ends of the exchange. Morning, Steve. I bet you feel a bit silly today after believing that the Russian propaganda that the Prime Minister had his home set on fire by rent boys put LBC on now. To which Steve has replied, I hope you have got LBC on at the moment, Steve. Steve has replied, morning, Matt. Nah, I don't trust Starmer or the judiciary in this country anymore, which he seems to be using as a means to propagate his own twisted Fabian agenda. I mean, it's a view, isn't it? You'd need to have a completely warped idea of what and who the Fabians are, but I've seen that, I think, on various posts. The Fabians are a threat. Just come up with anything. Cultural Marxism, which was deeply anti-Semitic in its roots, didn't stop various editors of the Daily Mail to stick it in their editorials. But there it is. If someone believes something that is completely untrue, then all the proof in the world won't prise their knuckles off that bar, that thing they've got to cling on to. And what happens when you let go? Your life gets better, Steve. Not worse. Your life gets better. And you cease to be a traitor. You cease to be helping the Russians undermine British democracy. But hey-ho, you're not even getting paid for it. But, of course, the people who've pushed you into this position are, handsomely. 6 minutes after 12 is the time. I'm staying in slightly... well, there's two stories that I was considering doing next. One is one of my all-time favourite strange stories, which is cheap funerals. I'm going to talk myself into doing it, aren't I, in the course of this introduction. The Daily Telegraph has a piece today about advising you on how to spend as little as possible on a funeral, but we're not going to talk about that today, because I feel we've done it probably quite recently, or certainly quite often. I'm going to talk instead about something that is much less, you think death is pretty uncomfortable, but this is much more uncomfortable than that conversation. And it's one that I've been meaning to have with you for a while, but the story does develop. Do you know who David Stroud is? He became the first person ever to be sentenced under new legislation at Highbury Corner magistrates last week, after being convicted of a new crime, a crime that involved him harassing a lone female passenger on a train to London, making sexual comments, asking to kiss her, grabbing her hair, and while he was under caution, he told police that it was just banter. It's a crime that is called public sexual harassment, and of course, he described it as just banter, and of course it turned out after he was arrested that he was already on bail for a separate 22-month stalking campaign, and subsequently, of course, he was sentenced for both offences but wasn't sent to jail, because I don't think that this country, this society, this system takes this stuff seriously enough. And I think part of the reason for that, and I want to choose my words quite carefully, because I don't kind of want to prove my own point, as it were. I don't want to be the proof of my own point, as it were. But I think part of the problem here is, I was going to say something bleeding obvious, which is part of the problem here is men. All of the problem here is men. But I think part of the problem is men who don't realise the scale of the problem. So men who are not part of the problem become part of the problem by dint of not realising the scale of the problem. Is that making sense? Am I making sense? So you have, as a man, very, very little idea of what it is like to be a woman in public in this country, in most countries. Possibly except in countries where burqas are commonplace, I don't know, but there is a rationale that justifies the wearing of a burqa by pointing out the hideous harassment that women undergo in countries that are, quotes, free, end quotes, like this one. How do we address that? So I think all men will be guilty. Not of harassing women, but of not realising how big the problem is or how widespread the problem is. I usually cite a story here from 1988. This is because I'm such a paragon of virtue. It's the only thing I can think of when I experienced appalling behaviour that I thought was just banter. And when I used to have conversations about this earlier in this so-called career of mine, I used to hear from women who would insist that it was just banter. Up to and including women who told me that they enjoyed having their bottoms pinched when they were secretaries in the 1960s or 1970s because it was flattering. And I can't argue with those women, can I? That would be mansplaining taken to an entirely ridiculous new degree. But I'd like to think that other women might step in and point out how you have been gaslit into thinking that that was A-OK or B, quite flattering, when it was, in fact, the exact opposite. And then when I was a less thoughtful man, when I still had this job, I used to say things like, if I'm brutally honest with you, I still see some salience in this observation, and that would be if a bloke that you found very, very attractive said or did something identical to what a bloke who you found hideous and frightening said or did, then your reaction would be very different. But guess what, lads? That's her right. That's her prerogative. And you can't really be confused about it because you know that you're a bloke that she finds frightening and obnoxious. You're not a bloke that she finds irresistible. But there's something there. You just get that little nugget of, what is it, confusion? I don't know. But I do know this. I am a husband and son and brother of women and father of young women. And when these stories first started emerging, I felt my head spinning. Because what it is, and my wife does this, or did this, I'm in a slightly different place now, knowledgeably, not least because I have young daughters. But I always thought it was man bites dog territory. Forgive me for this, because it is pretty shameful on my part to have managed to have reached the age of about, 48 or something, thinking that a woman being harassed in public by a man was man bites dog territory, i.e. something remarkable, something notable, something that you really register when it happens and you respond accordingly. As my daughters reached the age where it started happening to them, people making unwanted comments, people... you can't stop. I don't think we'll ever be able to legislate for the way people look or leer or ogle other human beings, but once it is verbalised, once it is articulated, you can see how it's moved into the realms of legislation. But until it started happening to my own daughters, I had absolutely no idea how commonplace it was. Like, I'd rather not catch a train on my own at any time of day. I'd rather not get on the underground on my own at any time of day. And I realised that it is pure man bites dog territory. It is utterly, utterly commonplace. And there's a part of me that still doesn't fully understand why this comes as a shock to men like me. Part of the reason for that is that we haven't been told enough. And I think part of the reason for that is that for women like you, it's so utterly baked into your normal existence that you barely thought it worthy of mention. Until you do mention it, and the man in your life goes, "What, every day? No. What, 3 times a week? No. What, when you were 14? No." It's. I can't think of a bigger dichotomy between people who are simpatico with each other, people who, if you like, people who are on the same side. I can't think of a bigger dichotomy than on this issue between men and women who might share a home or share a bed, share a family, share a life, and yet one of you knows this subject inside out, intimately and personally, and the other one is was living in a state of borderline blissful ignorance. Can you think of anything else that would fit into this category? That you find out the people you love most in the world are routinely and regularly and constantly experiencing things that you find outrageous and repellent, but they are so used to it and have been conditioned to get used to it from the age of about 11 that they don't even think it's worthy of mention. Don't come home and say, "Oh, a bloke said something to me on the tube today." They don't even do it. And I'm pretty sure I'm not unique. Don't get me wrong, I'm unique in lots of ways, but I'm pretty sure I'm not unique in this way. And I often wonder, whenever these stories come around, and this is a new story because it involves a bloke who thought that it was banter and feels he's been very badly treated and has described himself as being unlucky to be the first person convicted under the law. He's been made to appear like a monster. World's tiniest violin, please, Keith. But the point is, he's got no idea how obnoxious his behaviour is. I don't imagine, and I don't want to make light of a serious issue, but I don't imagine any love stories ever begin in circumstances like this. So a bloke who may or may not be drunk, and I mention that because part of his sentence involved a 90-day alcohol abstinence monitoring tag and 15 days of mandatory rehabilitation. So a drunk bloke comes up to a woman on a train, starts pouring at her hair, telling she's beautiful and asking, and that 20 years from now, that's an origin story. "How did you and Mummy meet, Daddy?" "Oh, I was a bit drunk. I got on a train and I started touching her inappropriately and telling her she was good." In the same way, I don't imagine anybody... I got a horrible feeling. I said this next bit on the radio once and I got a message saying, "Actually, James, that is how I met my husband." But I don't think anybody has ever met their husband because he leant out of a van window at the traffic lights and complimented her on the size of her boobs. Hey, call me an old romantic if you must, but I don't think that has ever happened. And I also don't know where society draws the line, because women will draw the line in different places. Women on one extreme will tell me that they enjoyed being sexually harassed at work because they took it as a compliment, And at the other extreme, they would tell me that they don't like men opening doors for them in the office because it's sexist. I find both positions close to impenetrable. I also know that when I start a conversation like this, a certain type of man will either start A, moaning, or B, claiming that it's just as bad for men because I once got my bottom pinched when I was working at a waiter in the brasserie in Kidderminster in 1990. Oh, hang on, that was the story I used to share when we were having conversations like this. It was almost like a reluctance more than a refusal to believe that things were as bad as they clearly were. So how do we do it? How do we have the conversation? 12:17 is the time. I want you to tell me about the first time you remember it happening. I want you to tell me how old you were and what happened and how it made you feel. That's all. Because it's extraordinary, isn't it, that we can be sitting here in 2026 contemplating legislation, addressing public harassment, and as men having an almost unbelievably different understanding of the reality behind this legislation than women have. And it's our fault for not asking questions and knowing more. But I am now asking those questions in the hope of knowing more. Tell me about the first time. I mean, if you want to get involved in a more philosophical discussion, we can try and draw the line between banter and harassment. I mean, chatting somebody up in public. I don't want calls from men, lads. Come on, Graham, Daryl, Robert. I know you've got interesting things to say, but I don't want to talk to you yet. Let's just clear the space, shall we? Let's clear the aisle, as it were, for women who have experienced what we are talking about. No offence, boys, but come on, do better. The first time it happened, the first time you remember it happening to you, when a bloke in public sexualised you. And I don't want to sound naive or idealistic, but I can't help imagining it involving a sort of loss of innocence. So you go in a moment from being a girl, a young girl, who is relatively carefree in public spaces. And I may be embarrassing myself with this observation. I may be completely misrepresenting your reality, but I'm always honest with you, even if I end up feeling like a prune for doing so. You go in a moment from being an unsexualized human being to being a sexualized human being because some man takes it upon himself to say something to you in public. And I know that this may be also something that makes me sound stupid in retrospect, but the massive majority of men will not do that. And many of us don't really have any idea of A, how often it happens to you, and B, how significant it is. So that's how we do it, okay? 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. As we're looking at calls for lessons to prevent harassment, let's talk about what it is from the perfect perspective of what has actually happened to you. You would call it harassment, even if the bloke that did it might not. You would. What happened? How old were you? And how did it make you feel? I think still in 2026, with the new legislation in place and conversations about Me Too and similar, I still think this is going to shock some of the men listening, and precisely none of the women. It's 12:20.
James O'Brien on LBC.
Slightly more philosophical conversations about what caused it or how you get rid of what you do. But today the question is fairly simple. As men convicted of public harassment, or the first man convicted of public harassment, claims that he was just bantering and he's unlucky and he's appearing like a monster, and apparently believes it. If he still thinks he can use the excuse that it was just banter, then something's really not working. I want your stories. And maybe a nudge towards how you would make a bloke realise that what he's doing is not just, quotes, banter, but is in fact harassment. Linda's in Lytham, St Anne's. Linda, what would you like to say?
Hello, I was just telling your colleague that when I was 15, so it's quite a few years ago now, I was walking from school to see my grandparents, and there was a group of men surrounding a sort of local council van. There were sort of local, I think, road workers or something, and they started to make some very lewd gestures using fingers and tongues and all sorts. And it really, really, really shook me up. It was quite terrifying. I felt very vulnerable.
Yeah.
It was during the middle of the day, so it wasn't that I was sort of walking in the night time, but it did feel very threatening. And I walked very quickly to my grandfather's and told him what happened. I burst into tears.
Oh.
And he was lovely. He was furious that it happened, but he also rang the council straight away and made a formal complaint.
Wow.
We didn't hear anything from it after that, but I presume and I would hope that something was mentioned.
Yeah, I would hope. I wouldn't necessarily presume, that depending partly on when it was. I mean, some of the messages that are coming in via text involve the behaviour being dismissed by people who you would hope would know better, and if it was commonplace at the time, I don't know. So your granddad was made of different stuff from a lot of people of that generation, who would have just said that's just men being men.
Yeah, I think, to be honest, I feel that my grandfather was very much pro, sort of, by the time he was a grandfather, very much pro granddaughters, because he had quite a few of them.
I love it.
But I don't think he had the same attitude when his sons were younger. It was quite a big family.
Okay.
There was my mother and about 5-6 brothers. And I think, some of the boys, although we were all a lovely family, I think they probably would have displayed a little bit of cheeky behaviour, as it was called. And I think it was only because he saw it firsthand from a granddaughter's point of view. Sorry, my radio's going.
That's all right, don't worry.
Sorry. I think because it was his granddaughter who was very vulnerable and obviously saw me visibly shaken, I think that...
It changes you completely. Yes, of course it does. And if it had been relayed to him third or fourth hand, he wouldn't have had that visceral personal reaction, but it wasn't. It was relayed to him first hand by his beloved granddaughter. And did it? I mean, how did it change you? I don't want to sound sort of weird, but I'm struck by the idea that you go in a moment from not being sexualised to being sexualised.
I think there was an awful lot of it in those days, and it's certainly at school. In fact, I found sort of correspondence from some boys at school very recently, so that's why it was quite topical. And there was a lot of coercive language. And I think when I was younger, I was of the generation where girls were sexualised, and you wanted to be popular. And I feel that the whole sort of situation around then was tolerated. And I think it was only because it was strangers that did it in the street where I now felt more vulnerable that it did make me think very differently about how men's behaviour was targeted towards me.
And no man will ever feel that. I mean, that is at the absolute heart of this issue and all of these conversations, is that no man will ever feel that. Ever. There's nothing you could do to have that sense. And I'm struck more and more as I get older by the constant nature of it. It doesn't have to be happening now. It's simply the knowledge that it could and will at some point, probably soon. Thank you, Linda. Sandy is in Angmering?
Angmering, yeah, that's right. Well done, James.
Thank you very much, Sandy. What made you pick up the phone today?
Oh, this is so timely, and actually I'm still kind of processing what happened this morning.
Oh, gosh.
So I was actually getting out of my car, and there was a white van that had 2 men in it. As I got out of my car, they shouted something at me about my anatomy, the top half of my anatomy. And the challenge is that I wasn't wearing a bra today. The reason I wasn't wearing a bra is because I've recently had quite major surgery, and I have quite a lot of scar tissue, and it makes wearing things like that quite uncomfortable.
Sure.
But it's something that I'm actually conscious of every day, if I'm allowed to say nipple on the radio.
Of course you well, you have now. Anyway, it's me that gets into trouble, not you. Also, how do you know Keith's nickname?
So my nipples are often now on show because I can't wear the type of underwear I would have worn before.
Okay.
And it makes me incredibly anxious because I feel like I'm drawing unwanted attention to myself, and that makes me feel somehow like it's my fault.
So those men think it's an invitation?
Sure, and
scumbags.
But I was shaking from that experience afterwards because I had been objectified and verbally abused, and I had nowhere to go, and I somehow felt that I'd drawn attention to myself. And I think this is what men can't possibly understand about women, is when we get dressed in the morning, there is a consciousness. And these kind of complex thoughts about intentionality and attention and vulnerability and as somebody, I've experienced a lot of sexual violence in my life, unfortunately. And
there is a link, right? I mean, it's like the shallow end and the deep end.
Sure.
And a lot of the men who engage in the behaviour you witnessed today are never going to be sexually violent, but they're on the same graph.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. No. I don't know about that, because I think, unfortunately, if we knew what type of men were sexually violent, we would be able to do something about that. And I think, actually, in my own experience, it's the men that you often don't think would be
the ones you least suspect.
But I mean, I was listening to your previous caller, and I think, I too grew up in an age where if you went to a nightclub in a miniskirt, you would very likely be assaulted, what we would consider assault now.
Yes.
And that was just commonplace. That was just normal. And you would look at these inappropriate men and you would say, excuse me. But it was, but in your mind, in that time, you didn't see it as assault in the way that, for instance, now I educate my daughters that nobody has a right to touch any part of your body at any time or make any comment about it. It's completely unacceptable.
And that's I mean, an optimistic take, because if we've changed attitudes so completely, and I know some women will still be assaulted and groped and a victim of the kind of behaviour you described, but nobody would, I don't think, chalk it up as normal anymore. So we could probably do the same. We could probably do the same with the verbal equivalents, if society takes it seriously enough.
I agree, and sorry to link two stories, but with the conversation yesterday about the banning of social media, I suppose one of my feelings and one of my fears is that girls are so good at advocating for themselves now because they learn so much from other women on platforms like social media. If their parents aren't informed enough, so if I hadn't have gone through that radical transformation of understanding that nobody has a right to speak about or touch my body, if I hadn't have gone through that transformation myself, perhaps I wouldn't be empowering my daughters, and perhaps they would need platforms like that to learn. I also recognise there's a flip side with it being a cesspit where people do comment about other people's bodies, but I do think it's a learning space.
No, and of course the challenge the government currently faces is to find new homes for the good stuff or new ways to access the good stuff, while hopefully excising the bad stuff from the discourse. Sandy, I and many listeners who have got in touch, and I'm sure hundreds of thousands more who haven't, wish you a very, very full and speedy recovery. A horrible thing. 12:31 is the time. I'm not. This is going to sound a little bit. I don't know quite what the word is. This is about the verbal harassment, the verbal public harassment, more than anything else. So just that sort of entry-level misogyny or that entry-level harassment as opposed to the more explicitly physical. So I do understand why those stories are incredibly important and an even more deeply disturbing dimension of the entire conversation. But I think that it's easier to chalk... You can't chalk up a physical assault as banter, even though this character may have tried to. Banter is going to be verbal. And so it's the verbals that I'm interested in at the moment. John Stratford's here now with your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
Said, how do you like your eggs in the morning, writes Emily. I looked confused and he said the right answer is fertilised. I was so uncomfortable I told another staff member. I also told his wife and she said, oh, that's just Dave. When my then 22-year-old daughter told her dad that her driving instructor had touched her and tried to groom her, her dad responded with laughter instead of sympathy. My daughter never told her dad her problems again. My first public, that was from Andrea. This is from Lisa. My first public sexualised comment from a man came when I was about 14, and my friend's dad jokingly referred to me as top-heavy. It was in front of his wife, his daughter, and others, and it got a laugh, but it didn't register with me until much later in life that it was inappropriate. I am inundated with stories like this, and I just want to continue the conversation so that the kind of men who are not ever going to do anything heinous realise that they're sort of paddling in the waters of heinousness. It's about what is acceptable and what is not. I hope I'm right that the physical contact is now less commonplace than it was when you were younger. I think I am, but it's far from what's the word that I want? Far from excised. It's still real. It's just how you explain to somebody who thinks it's banter that it's not. I don't actually know the answer to that question, so feel free to add that to your list of requests this hour. How do you really demonstrate to somebody they honestly and given the benefit of the doubt, they genuinely believe it is, quotes, banter? Right? How do you persuade them that it's not? How do you show them that it's not? Sarah is in Elstree. Sarah, what would you like to say?
Hi, James.
Hello.
How are you?
Very well, thank you. How are you?
I'm not bad, not bad. I've been listening to you for years. It's the first time I literally pulled the car over and thought, oh my God, I've got to call.
I get them all in the end, Sarah.
I know. Oh, gosh.
Go on.
I don't know where to start.
Take all the time you want.
I have 3 daughters, and I have 3 sons. Okay. And my 3 daughters are first, and my youngest daughter, very recently, in her school uniform, and very evidently her school uniform,
yes,
was standing at the station to catch the train home, and across on the other side of the platform were a group of young men who started commenting on how she looked and how beautiful she was, and, you know, would she like to come and talk to them? And, you know, she kept trying to ignore them, and she smiled politely and said, no, thank you. I'd like to just get home, please. And one of the young men took offence to it, took offence to her ignoring him, and started being very aggressive. And said, oh, are we not good enough for you? Am I not good enough for you? Oh, you're so uppity, you're so frigid, you're so... And mind you, my daughter's 16 years old.
Okay.
Now here's the thing. You know, you hear a lot about, well, you know, when you're with a group of friends, you know, it's up to friends as well. They should speak up. They should... you know, try and correct friends. It's not just about what you're doing, but if you see something wrong, speak up. And she said to me that, you know, his friends were telling him, oh my God, can you just leave it? Can you see that you're making her uncomfortable?
Wow.
And they were being very loud, and they were saying, will you just stop it and leave her alone? And he just was not having it. He started running down the stairs.
No.
To come down and cross over to her platform. And as he was running up the stairs to her and literally aggressively saying, why don't you want to come back with me? Why are you ignoring me? She's terrified now.
Of course.
Now she's terrified.
And his friends have done more than many in similar circumstances, but they haven't flipping stopped him from legging it towards your daughter.
No. I mean, they tried very subtly, and then, you know, but the train came just at that second.
Oh, God.
The doors opened, she jumped in, and just as the doors were closing, he was there banging on the glass. And now here's the thing. She came home, she was shaking, she was absolutely terrified, and I immediately said, let's go to the station, I'll ask for the CCTV, and she said, Mama, no, please, because I go there every day, and if they come there again, and if I've identified them, or if I, bring something, to the police, and I don't want to accelerate the situation where it becomes worse. Now, here's where it gets tricky. So I've brought my daughters up to be warriors.
Of course.
And I've told them, you shout, you be the loudest person in the room, and don't you ever, ever be a shrinking violet. I've tried my best to bring them up as fierce women. And I know a lot of people will say, oh, well, you know, that's not necessarily the best way. But do you know what? It's the only way. It's the only way. I mean, I cannot tell you what it's like. Well, I mean, you will know, I'm sure, when you have a daughter, if I'm not mistaken, when she gets older.
Yeah. No, they're old enough.
Yeah, I mean, when they go out, even in the daytime. So keep your phone near you. Keep something in your bag. When you go out, try and take a friend. Don't have your AirPods in your ear. And you know what? It was a different form of advice, but I was given the same advice when I was younger, as was my mother. And the only thing that I can do now is that my 3 sons, who are very young, my youngest is 9, but I have made it a point that from .go, every single time something is mentioned or their sisters talk about something, I make it a lesson for them. I make it a learning curve for them. And some of my friends have said, oh, don't you think they're a bit young to hear that? And I said, no, they're not.
You can't be too young, but I don't know if there are any guarantees either, Sarah. I mean, you know, peer pressure is an incredibly intoxicating thing, and although things have clearly improved, I don't know that and I don't have sons, so I can say this, but I don't know that you can ever be 100% confident that a lad, particularly with some of the influences they may be exposed to online these days, that a lad may fall into this sort of behaviour. I'd forgotten about the online element because things got better for a while, but now in a world where Andrew Tate is a finger flick away, things are going to get worse again. And because I was struck by the fact that the boy harassing your daughter, the man harassing your daughter, is of a similar age to her, slightly older than her.
He must have. I mean, they must have been about 18, 19 years old.
Exactly. So that is possibly a consequence of the manosphere undoing a lot of the work that was done by some previous generations.
I mean, look, the thing is that, yes, they were young boys, and I have no idea what influences they have or don't have. All I can say for myself is that I've tried my best. I don't give my boys social media. I just don't. And I try my best. There are ways around it, for sure.
And it should get easier now after yesterday's announcement. It should get easier to keep it that way.
It is so funny because I have been laughing my head off and my boys have been like, no. And I'm like, oh, yes. And I'm so excited that I don't have to have this argument. But there's one thing. In our home, what I've tried my best to do is that nothing is a conversation that can't be had.
Nothing is off limits.
Nothing is off limits. No question is stupid. And come and talk to me about anything. So, and even if sometimes you feel something's inappropriate, maybe for their age, because I've got 14, 11, and 9 for the boys.
Right. Okay. And right on the money then.
And it can be sometimes inappropriate, but sometimes when they come and tell me things they've heard from school, I am absolutely horrified. Yeah. But then I take it as a teaching lesson. So we sit down, we talk about it, and I have to keep reminding them that you understand that your first adversary is going to be me. If I ever hear that you have said something inappropriate, that you have harassed a girl, that you have looked at a girl, even sideways, mate, I'm behind you. So,
yes, more mums like that, less misogyny on the streets, I think, is a fairly clear equation.
I can only hope that whatever, and again, this is not blowing my own trumpet, this is not a feather in my cap. I know lots of mums who are doing this, and all you can do is just hammer it home as much as you can. And my boys are lucky because they have 3 elder sisters.
Yes. I mean, you'd have to hope that made a difference, because that's the thing I was thinking about with regards to the 2 men in the van earlier, just shouting comments unthinkingly, is that how would the women in their life respond if they knew what they were doing? So, I mean, the threat is real, and the fear should be real as well of consequences, but But almost all of the men doing these kind of things will have women in their life who may not have laid down the law quite as robustly as you have done, but they will have women in their life who would be shocked, not to mention disgusted to discover that their men engaged in this sort of behaviour. Ah, man. And that, I mean, what you've done, Sarah, and I'm not going to thank you for it, but it's important that you did, is remind me that the direction of traffic is not positive. I mean, it was for a long time, as we undid the sort of 1970s style, what you could possibly describe as soft misogyny or entry-level misogyny. You've now got professional misogynists, and once again we come back to social media. You've now got professional misogynists profiteering from spreading precisely the kind of bile that would be a criminal act if you did it upon the streets, even before the new legislation. So how on earth do you explain to young women, or rather young men, that they can't do this kind of thing when they can point at someone who claims to have made millions out of essentially encouraging and teaching misogyny? It's 12:47.
James O'Brien on LBC.
So this chap just listened to the same caller you listened to, Sarah, talking about women being abused in the street and raising her sons to be better than that. And Rob's response is, this woman is unhinged towards her sons. I should say, for Sarah's benefit, and if anyone else needs to hear it, that every other message to come in to the studio in response to that call was praising and complimenting. So let's see what goes on in what passes for Rob's brain, shall we? What kind of character would respond to a conversation about a mother encouraging her sons not to be misogynistic? What might some of his other beliefs involve? Here's one from earlier today, in fact. It's not that I necessarily believe the Rent Boys story, it's just that I don't believe anything when it comes to two-tier. There you go, two-tier kit. It's almost like a bingo sheet, isn't it? So, not yet racist, but we found plenty of evidence of the misogyny. Oh, here's one. Here is a novel idea, James. Maybe Elon Musk wants to preserve Western culture from these third world savages. Gets my vote. So we've got the misogyny, we've got the racism. I suspect that he doesn't extend to climate change denial, and I haven't really got the patience or the energy to work my way through it. But here's another one. This is from last week. Your condescending left-wing whining doesn't cut through anymore, lovey. Mate, you've sent me about 30 messages in the last week, so something's cutting through, although I appreciate you've got a lot of time on your hands since you were stopped from seeing the kids. If not wanting third world savages attempting to behead innocent people on our streets make me right-wing, then that's a badge I'm glad to wear. I'm just going to have a little look for anything you've sent in to any presenters condemning white criminals or white murderers, Rob, in Epsom. Nope, nothing there. Just come on, you must have had something to say about a white criminal. Why are you referencing the latest news from Iran? Well, because I suppose you don't want us to talk about Iran, given that it's very embarrassing for Donald Trump. No, not very impressed by me pointing out that Nigel Farage was ignoring Henry Novak's family. There you go, making Henry Novak's killing about race, despite the fact the judge and the prosecution lawyer and the family of Henry said it. Well, Rob, you're an absolute charmer, aren't you? Anyway, weird. You see the misogyny in the first message, and then there's 10 racisms in the next 9. And you think, I exaggerate. These people walk among us. Jennifer is in Birmingham to take us back to what it's like to be on the receiving end of behaviour from men like Rob. Jennifer, what would you like to say?
Hello, James.
Hello, Jennifer.
Obsessive listener, but second-time caller.
That's all right. That's not a bad average.
Something that happened this week, actually. I'd left some stuff at our holiday home, some washing that I'd taken out the washer. It wasn't quite dry, but it was almost. So I just sort of left it out.
Yeah.
Then we had a bit of a problem with the holiday home, so I needed a handyman to go in and sort that out.
Right.
Which I did, and then was surprised to receive a photo of my underwear saying, with a message saying, this on WhatsApp, saying, did you leave this out to tease me?
Oh, my Lord.
And I'm ashamed to say I didn't actually call him out on it. I just ignored it. I didn't answer in any way. But it made me feel grubby. It didn't make me feel I should have left my best underwear out, but it certainly made me feel grubby and horrible. And that somebody that I'd allowed into my home, not just a house, into my home and into my bedroom to do a particular job, then felt it appropriate to not only notice but then to intimidate me by sending that message. And I think the thing about this is that it's not... I mean, I think he would say it was banter, but I don't think he realises that this is a much deeper thing. This is about we don't matter. It doesn't matter what we think as women. We're there to be bantered at. We are...
Yeah, I mean, it took me a while to fully understand what the word objectification meant in these sort of contexts, but you are not a human being in that exchange. You are the sum of your private parts and or underwear. That's it. That's what he's kind of talking about.
Yes, and I've brought up 3 sons. They're all middle-aged now, and I've fought this. I mean, I get teased a lot within the family now. They tease me about being such a feminist, but they tease me because they respect the fact that I am, and that I brought them up properly. And we can have jokes between us where one of them will say something sexist to me. Yeah. With his tongue in his cheek, because actually what we're all taking the mick out of is other men. Is the belief that sort of thing is okay? Yes. So it's open enough that we can make those comments, but it's this drip-fed sexism that we get, and those little things like what happened about this underwear this week. What do you say to someone who says if you don't call him out on that, he'll do it again, and the next person he does it to may not be as robust as you, shall we say? I know, and I feel horrible about it. And what would you say? Because I don't think it's easy. I think it's easy for people to send in messages saying, "Oh, why hasn't?" But I don't think it's. What would you actually say, mate? What I do about? I'll pick this up from you, James. What I say about racism and whatever to say. What do you actually want to say? Yeah. What did you mean by that? Yeah. It's more difficult when it's a photo on a WhatsApp. Of course but you can still say. Sometimes I pretend I haven't heard properly. When somebody makes a sexist comment, to make them commit to it. Yeah. And you don't very often get it said the second time. So make people explain a sexist comment or an inappropriate joke, and not only does any supposed humour get sucked out of the room at a rate of knots, but they end up so exposed, don't they? Well, it's only because we've got a chip on our shoulder anyway. That's the thing, isn't it, with us women? We've got a chip on our shoulder, and we've obviously had an argument with our husband, and that's what's made us this way. Oh, Lord, of course it is, yeah. Not to mention the race card. If you've not got a chip on one shoulder, it's the race card in the other one, on the other arm. But I mean it. I mean, that guy is going to go away thinking that, that you didn't mind, isn't he? Yes, but the other thing is, James, I'm going to call you out on this now. Go on. Oh, no. Hang on, Sheila's here. Hello. Oh, that's a shame, Jennifer. Anyway, end of the show. Jennifer. End of the show. No, go on, Jennifer. What were you going to say? But if somebody makes a sexist comment to me and I don't call them out, it's not my fault for not calling them out. No, absolutely it's not. And I didn't mean to even seem to suggest that that's... I was simply asking... You've made me sound like Nigel Farage now, Jennifer, and for that I can never forgive you. It's coming up to 12:58. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. I had an absolute peach of a missing word round, and I completely forgot to do it with you, which... but I'll do it now. So Dana White is the guy that runs the fighting stuff that they've just had on the White House lawn. The UFC event that ended with one of the fighters got escorted off the premises. I don't know if you know that, because he's been a very outspoken critic of Donald Trump's friendship with Jeffrey Epstein and the continuing failure to publish all of the appearances that Donald Trump makes in the so-called Epstein files. But one of the ones that didn't get escorted off the premises shouted, Michelle Obama is a man, or something like that, which is what passes for banter, actually, in Donald Trump's universe. But the bloke who owns the whole thing, the bloke who runs the whole UFC thing, and remember, we've discussed now at some length how there are echoes of UFC or wrestling tropes in Donald Trump's politics. He said something fantastic last month, and I managed to miss it. So see if you can fill in the missing words here. Dana White is his name. Dana White says Trump can't be racist because he was friends with... ... Who would you slot into that space? So Donald Trump, according to his friend who runs the wrestling, Donald Trump can't be racist because he was friends with... ...
... Now, who would you reach for first as an absolute reputation cleanser? He was friends with ... Therefore, he must be cleaner than clean, whiter than white, if you pardon the pun. Yeah. Dana White says Donald Trump can't be racist because he was friends with Michael Jackson. And that's it from me for another day. If you missed any of today's show, you can listen back on our free Global Player app or the LBC app, where you can also stay up to date with all the latest news, videos and opinion. Podcasts galore, including James O'Brien Daily, the best bits of this show every day, and Full Disclosure, my long-form interview series. So download it now for free from your app store. Tom Strawbrick will be with you at 4, but now it's time for Sheila Fogarty.
James O'Brien on LBC.